أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair. You know, I'm first of all honored to be here at the Mass Greater LA Convention and also to hear the name Dr. Jamal Badawi. I have to admit I'm a little bit selfish in pushing to make sure that I made it here this weekend because I really wanted to see him. I've not seen him for a couple of years. And someone like him, and trying to do this work and trying to, you know, especially be a professor as I am trying to be and also serve the community, he really is the trendsetter. And mashallah, tabarakallah, for over 40 years, 45 years, he's been literally, as Brother Mazen said, somebody who has been a cornerstone of so much of the Islamic work, having personally served on the boards of many organizations, but also guided them and advised them. And I can truly say, you know, to learn about someone and the personality, and really how prophetic the personality is. One of the reasons he gave one time, he was at a conference, and some of the youth were discussing something, and they thought they wanted to hear some more about Salat al-Istikhara. And someone said, you know, Dr. Jamal Badawi, I think he's still here, we should ask him. They went to him and they said, you know, the youth are here, they're just wondering, you know, can you just talk to them a little bit about Salat al-Istikhara? SubhanAllah, literally he said to them, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared. Dr. Jamal Badawi said to the people asking, he said, I'm so sorry, I'm not prepared. Like he didn't feel he could impart knowledge about the religion until he sat down and he personally spent time preparing for that birthday. By the way, if you look back at all the videotapes when we started taping these conferences decades ago, he's the first person to begin to use organized notes such as PowerPoints in these presentations. He would use these old slides. He was the one that taught us the importance of coming with prepared thoughts and a structured, if you will, presentation. So really, I'm indebted to someone like him, and to may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve and protect him and his family. And I also want you to be able to thank the organizers of this convention. It takes many months of planning, and I hope when you see the people with the badges that say something about volunteer or subcommittee, that you stop them. And inshallah that you thank them for what they've done. But alhamdulillah, tonight is not fundraising, tomorrow night will be. So don't think I'm headed there. Inshallah you'll support by virtue of knowing the great work that Mass is doing. But the topic that I have in particular is focused on pathways to change. So we've been talking about the Prophet ﷺ as the one who inspired personally and prophetically through his teachings and the character, so much change, not only in Arabia, but it spread throughout the world. But now we want to talk about how we can be agents of change. And at least three things can be mentioned. One is to reflect partly, or partially, because of the time we have, on the great contributions that Islam made to civilization. But also to talk about how you and I, because we can't live in the past. So how can you and I begin to think about making additional contributions to civilization? And then lastly, the role of Muslim individuals and organizations in becoming and being these sort of pathways of change. Brother Mazen laid the foundation, if you will, on the importance, at a time when so much dishonesty is prevalent, the importance of being honest, if you will, and indeed how that in itself elevates the entire dialogue. If we begin to talk about Muslims, the impact on civilization, we have to reflect on where society was, partially on pre-Islamic and during the pre-Islamic era. And if you look at some of the worst challenges facing humanity today, in terms of infanticide, the idea of killing off children, if you will, sometimes even obviously before birth, but even the notion in India and some other places of killing off girls, it's still prevalent today. not necessarily in Muslim societies, but in the world, it's still a problem. If you talk about anything to do with womanizing and gambling, substance abuse and addiction, all of these things are also prevalent. If you talk about values and ethics, if you talk about the rights of the vulnerable, all of these things were social issues. And it was difficult, if not impossible, it seemed at the time, for the prevalent frameworks, societal frameworks, to solve or address these problems. And so it was that in these dark days and nights came the light of Islam through the Prophet ﷺ, who, for the first 40 years of his life, is recorded in so many books of seerah, had absolutely everything going for him. That when it was announced that he was the Prophet ﷺ, there was absolutely no contradiction in the first 40 years of his life than what he was going to be calling people to after Nubuwwah, after prophethood. And why is that consistency important? It is very important because we want to be able to say and to tell people that we believe and we love and we are so enamored with this personality that is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that indeed it was his example, his model, that allowed so many billions and billions of people over the centuries to be able to believe in a message brought by a messenger whom they never saw. And so, what gave rise to that? The Quran calls us kuntum khayra ummah. It calls us as if you are the best of the nations. Ukhrijat linnas, that have been brought out by out of all of the other nations. But there were responsibilities. You couldn't just have a title. Nowhere on earth, even in this convention, no one can just have a title without having responsibilities. You can't just say, I'm the chair of the hospitality committee and you don't even know anything about what's going on with where people are staying, how are they eating. You can't just walk around with titles. You have to know your responsibilities. And mashallah, tabarakallah. This is exactly what the companions did. This is exactly what the people who followed them, all of them, subhanAllah, day after day after day as the religion spread, each of them learned something about the religion, perfected it, and attempted to live it out in their daily lives. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that indeed we created human beings in the best of molds. This is all of mankind. So everyone has the fitratic potential from fitrah to reach that height of nobility, the karama, that is guaranteed, if you will, or that was bestowed upon the children of Adam alayhi salam. It's not that anyone, because if you had that thinking, that you had to be born Muslim, then almost everyone else who enters into the religion, or even who returns to the religion after being born as a Muslim, would feel somewhat held back, because this would not apply to them. No, in fact, we feel that the companions who came into Islam sometimes in their mid-20s and 30s and 40s, they went on to become ultimately the carriers of the prophetic personality and character. Despite how we think sometimes, I'm getting married in my late 20s or 30s, or I'm already, or set person, I can't change. I can't change who I am. No, this is just made up, this is psychological defeat. In fact, they did, and they went on to do so much. So, the Quran laid out a societal framework that addressed the most socially complex issues of the time, and did not burden the people to say, you do it overnight. Even the Prophet ﷺ brought about change so organically, so slowly, waiting, watching. Even Revelation could have been all one book. It wasn't. Some of it is a chronological, if you will, capturing of history, of things that happened much before the Prophet ﷺ. Others of it were in response to incidents as they were unfolding. And in the short time we have, we can't go through all of that, but you understand what we're saying. and others of it were a sharing or dissemination of values and teachings that became eternal. That no matter where a person was, they could apply it. And so, the great contributions of our own past, and even now when you talk about what is troubling America so much, I had a session with the youth between 3 and 5 today. We talked about what are the major issues. There were 4 or 5 groups. They talked about racism. One group discussed racism, just the boys, young men. One group discussed income inequality. They chose these issues. Another one discussed drugs and the use of drugs and the challenges facing people who are using drugs. Another one discussed police brutality. Our contributions of the past, this Quranic and prophetic framework, can actually be applicable and can be applied to the issues we are facing today. And when I get to that part as I close, you'll realize the only thing holding us back from solving these socially complex problems is ourselves. It is not the book of Allah, it is not the message of the Prophet ﷺ, and it is not the teachings of the companions and all of those who followed them. May Allah be pleased with all of them. Because when they were close to the Quran, they elevated mankind. They reminded mankind of the innate dignity which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given human beings. We talk about healthcare now, the underinsured and the uninsured. We as a nation cannot even provide the basic healthcare that would help to elevate the quality of life of the average person in America. And indeed, Muslims were at the forefront of developing what is the modern-day hospital. The modern-day hospital. The idea that you had to have wards. Not all illnesses and patients could just be triaged together. The notion of addressing mental health issues. All of this, people living with physical disabilities, to treat them with dignity, to be inclusive, include them, in meaningful ways in daily life, and not to shun them or to push them aside. These are our values. These are not somebody else's values. We talk a lot about our children should become doctors. But if they become doctors, and all they do is chase the degree and the money, then they are no different than all the other doctors that are coming out every year from different schools. Our doctors, the contribution was, and if you study the Crusades, time is so limited, if you study the Crusades, you'll find out the Christians who were injured during the fighting, even they would say, we would prefer to be under the hands of the Muslim surgeon over our own because of their skill with the scalpel. Their ability to do surgery without just amputating an entire arm, to be very skillful in their art and with their talent. We talk about education, the idea of providing education of student debt and this, that, and the other. We Muslims were at the forefront of contributing the idea of a university, indeed forming what would become the modern-day concept of the university. We were there, and then we left it, and then we fell behind, never to return. SubhanAllah, even now when we talk about it, it seems so impossible, but it is not, as I will say when I start to conclude. So what do we contribute towards civilization? How do we do it? On the surface level, it looks like they've invented just about everything. What am I going to do? So we do small things. I'm not minimizing them, but it just seems funny to me that we do these things and we take so much pride. So the car is already invented. But gears, and the technology of gears and all of that is our legacy. Is the legacy of Muslims. The Muslim scientists that thought of these things. So we can't do much more to cars. So what do? So when you open the car door, it actually says the dua for traveling. That's our contribution. That's our contribution. In reality, the time actually has gone by much faster than I expected, so I'll just wrap up myself. The reality is that there are values and ethics that we can contribute that will elevate really this quality of life for everyone concerned. So if you're going to be the doctor, the lawyer, the social worker, the journalist, the educator, whatever profession, be the person through whose character and personality and conduct the message of Islam is shared day in and day out. Be that taxi driver who returned over $10,000 some dollars to a passenger who had left behind cash in his taxi. Be the medical doctor who is ethical in the decisions on which surgeries are really needed and which could be avoided, and so on and on. And lastly, but not the least, to close out, the role of Muslim individuals and organizations. Awareness, accountability, and specialization, that's what my life has been about. Is that you cannot live anymore, we cannot live anymore, simply in a cocoon, sheltered by and hoping that somebody else is consuming the news and becoming aware of our legacy, and everybody else is just sort of like cattle walking through the streets. We have to become aware, not only self-aware about our personality and who we are, but also about our religion, also about our legacy, also about present-day state of Islam. Awareness is critical and very much a part of what the Prophet ﷺ always encouraged from his companions. To be aware of the needs and the circumstances of the times. Accountability, muhasabah, is something that is, overlooked. Every day we should stop and think, what is my tomorrow going to be like? Is it exactly the same as today? If it is, then nothing is changing. Nothing is changing. Can I at least acknowledge the fact that I need to improve one thing out of these conventions? What do you learn? When we were going through these conventions, we used to have notebooks. We used to take notes. Now it's just entertainment. Let's just see what they say. When you ask them, well, how was so-and-so speaker? Oh, he was funny. That became the character, almost like the level of assessment, that how funny was the person, otherwise they were not going to be, as effective. But specialization is critical. Specialization means staying in our lane. Staying in our lane. We as individuals have to realize we're not going to solve everything for everyone, be everything for everyone, not possible. Even in parenting, not possible. Some parents have more patience than other one spouse over the other. So hand off to the other. If you're impatient, if you're tested, if you're tired, too difficult of a day, don't go into a difficult parenting situation. Hand off to the other parent, the other spouse. Specialization will mean that even as organizations, we don't try to do everything for everyone. We choose a couple issues and then focus in on it. And brothers and sisters, if we are to become the bearers of all of this good news, that is Islam, the prophetic teachings and the message of the Quran, we will have to take the burden of supporting these organizations. All of them deserve our support. And so we cannot just say, you go and do it, like the people of Musa alayhi salam did. No. We have to join, volunteer, not even in leadership, just service, at the level of volunteering to do whatever is needed. And inshallah ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will restore us to the place where we were, leading civilization, not falling behind, and not being such a liability to the rest of the world. Indeed, we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the organizer of this convention, and indeed all of the speakers for the messages they have brought and they will bring, and hope that all of this will benefit us to make some improvement in our personal lives. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.